the FilmFile. The film show for film geeks by film... Just use the one we did. Hello and welcome to 2022 with the FilmFile, the film show for film geeks by film geeks, and introducing your regular geeks. Hello, I'm Lee Ford.
And I'm Andy Meakin.
But it is 2022 and we are back with a new FilmFile for the
episode
new year.
101.
101, yeah, of course.
Because
our 100th
if you remember,
landed.
if you remember, good old listeners, we got to episode 100 and then took a 2-week break, which was going to be a 3-week break, but we realised 2 weeks into the 2-week break that we'd recorded 2 full shows during that 2 weeks.
Yes.
So what was supposed to just be downtime for us with like 5 minutes of new content and some old material turned into just more episodes.
Yeah.
So we decided to cut the break short. We love doing this so much that we just thought, you know what? Let's just jump straight into it in the new year. Thankfully for a lot of the, should have said that, I've already edited those bits out.
I know yeah.
There's quite. I mean, the people who watch the videos will see some of the cutting room floor elements that are put back in there, but there's significantly more that is left out that I could never release to the general public.
which is for the best, really. The bit more swearier version of the FilmFile that I know you're shocked by. But first, here's the news.
I like the fact, is this new for this year? You're going to join in on the theme tune.
Yeah. And now, before you say your next line, you went in the France as your opening line. So if you just want to give yourself a drop in.
No, I like that in the France.
Okay, I'll let you look at that one then.
I could just remove the. I'm quite good at managing to snip just individual words out. In the France.
I know, it's weird. I do it all the time on the rock show. It's like, why did I say
Yorkshire.
that?
Very Yorkshire.
In
that
France.
there France. In France. But in France, I'll pop that in if I need to. I forgot what I was saying now. Films that person's done and what they've done in their personal lives, unless it's Tom Holland and Zendaya, because everyone loves them at the moment and they're marvellous. Let's be honest, those two are marvellous. I've been watching YouTube videos while I was waiting for you to come on today of them in interviews, and they are such a lovely couple, aren't they? Sorry, I just went a bit...
Right, you did. You got a bit fangirl.
Oh, I just went a bit of fangirl then. I just think that they're a great... I just think it's great watching them do anything together. Anyway. And I will remove those videos from their hotel rooms. Let's move on before I get
please. So this week's deep dive is going to be an interesting one. We're going to be talking about the 1985 American adventure comedy film, co-produced and directed by the late great Richard Donner, from a screenplay by Home Alone's Chris Columbus, and that is the Goonies. I'll do one more. Based on a story by executive producer Steven Spielberg. That is the Goonies. So, this is a story about kids who live in the Goon Docks neighborhood of Astoria, Oregon, attempting to save their home from foreclosure, and in doing so, they discover an old treasure map that takes them on an adventure to unearth the long-lost fortune of One-Eyed Willie, a legendary 17th century pirate. During the adventure, they are chased by a family of criminals who want the treasure for themselves. The film stars very young Sean Astin, a very young Josh Brolin, Jeff Cohen, Corey Feldman, Carrie Green, Martha Plimpton, and Ki Hoon Kwan. And what's going to be interesting about our deep dive this week is I have never seen the Goonies. But Andy, sell it to me. Tell me why I should see the Goonies.
Well, the main thing is that when you've got a story idea by Spielberg that gets fleshed out by Columbus and then Dick Donner making it, why would you not see this film? Let's be honest, those three names alone, if you said a new film with all those names was going to be made, you'd go, yeah, I'm in. You should see this film because it's more than just the child adventure film that it was when it first impacted on me at the age of 12. This came out when I was age 12 and I was perfectly the right age for going to see a film that was pitched on this whole idea of kids exploring pirate treasure. a sub Indiana Jones kind of concept. Uh, it's the kind of storytelling that the search for treasure is a search for, well, the search for the treasure to save the community is an excuse for a variety of various set pieces to be linked together, with the usual traps and the like clues getting followed as they're trying to get through caves, and like playing an organ to open doors and things like that. And they are great set pieces, especially the organ made out of bones that plays. You have to play the notes right in order for the doors to open, otherwise the platform falls away. There's perils, there's thrills. Like you say in the introduction, there's the escaped criminals who are chasing after the kids throughout because they get embroiled within their plot line. But the film itself is more than that. When I was a kid, I latched onto the action and the adventure and the comedy aspects of it. But on revisiting this as an adult, I've latched onto the depth of the story, as you'd expect from something that comes from Steven Spielberg. There's a lot of aspect of family and heart and community involved in it. Casting, Sean Astin holds this film together. Revisiting this film through adult eyes revealed to me exactly how solid a young actor he was. When it was released, I latched onto Corey Feldman's mouth character because he's very witty, he's very loud, he's very obnoxious, he's funny in that way. But as I got older, I realised Sean Astin is absolutely a treasure in this film. As playing Mikey, he's a kind of central figure of the Goonies who realises exactly what the redevelopment of their town means to them as a group and individuals. The search for treasure is not just a search for treasure, it's a search for hope to keep a community together, despite the encroachment of the wealthy who want to tear down the poor areas. Stolen riches from pirates' treasure is the only way to stop modern-day pirates stealing from the lives of the community. And there's a beautiful irony in that. And that's what I love about this film, is that watching it as an adult, I get so much more from it. Yes, I still love the thrill of adventure. Yes, I still love the comedy antics as the subplot involving the crime family. Played brilliantly. Anne Ramsey as Mama Fratelli, a grotesquely obnoxious woman. Robert Davi as Jake, and a very young Joe Pantoliano as Francis. They add so much comedy. And when they are interrogating the character of Chunk, who's the chubby kid who the others kind of mock, but he's full of tall stories. And when they say to him, tell us everything, and he starts telling his whole life story, has me in stitches every time. But the family also introduces another element of heart to the whole film. Their brother Sloth, who's he's a grotesque figure physically, but he's a childlike nature, and it conveys this kind of message that even at an early age I picked up on, that the message with Sloth being like presented initially from behind, shadowy, menacing, and then you get to know who he is. Never judge a book by its cover, and people can be good inside, even if they're horrible on the outside. And it's got so many things like that within this film that it just makes me, every time I go back to it, love it more and more.
I'm going to tell you why I never got to see it. And you're right, with those credentials, Chris Columbus, Steven Spielberg, and you know what a big fan I am of the work of Richard Donner, especially Lethal Weapon and especially Superman. This hit at a time when I was getting a bit cynical, because I'm a wee bit older than you. I think it landed when there was a lot of very loud movies, and especially with a teenage cast. I don't love as you do Lost Boys.
Yeah.
I find it annoying, even though I think the principal idea is fantastic. I think the delivery is a music video, and I think it's those elements that always put me off Goonies. And the clips that I saw around the time of its release were loud kids being very very loud and shouting at each other a lot, and then some very over the top action. And you know what? At that point in my life, I was completely over that. If I'd been 10 years younger, I think I would have lapped it up with a spoon. But at that point, I just think it wasn't the film for me. It wasn't talking to me in a way that other much more grown up films, and I don't
This
mean that with
this would
any
be
disrespect.
this would be the equivalent of what Edward Scissorhands was to me in the 1990. That
Yeah,
I was at that cynical age and I saw the marketing for it and thought, oh, that looks twee, and didn't watch it for years. And it was only like about 7 or 8 years afterwards that I watched it like on VHS or something. and suddenly went, wow, why did I not flock to this?
You see, now if I watched it, I wouldn't be bringing that baggage with it. I
Yeah,
wouldn't be in that mind space that I was back when it was released back in the 80s. It just didn't appeal. And there was a lot of Steven Spielberg produced movies that were very glossy, very sentimental, but just weren't saying anything. I'm looking at movies like Batteries Not Included
yeah,
around the same point, which were okay, but they were they lacked heart. They had the sentimentality, they had the great effects, they were incredibly well made, but there was something kind of cookie cutter, and it just wasn't where I was at that particular point in the
yeah,
80s. Give me a Lethal Weapon, give me a Die Hard in the 80s, absolutely in something with a bit more cynicism to it. But those films for me just weren't landing. I just wasn't into a movie with a bunch of kids yelling and screaming the way through it, and and I mean the actors, not the audience. So it passed me by, and more times than not, I've been asked, "Have I seen the Goonies?" No. Um, being belittled for not seeing the Goonies. My other half absolutely keeps saying we must see the Goonies. It's just landed on Netflix, so I will get around to it, and I might see it with different eyes, watching it with the child and seeing the
okay,
child's enjoyment of it, because I think it will be absolutely pitch perfect for him.
yeah,
But for me, that's not my reason. It's not to take anything away from the film. I won't criticize it as I've not seen it. It just wasn't when it came out where I was, and subsequently over the years, I've just had no interest in seeing it. I think this is the first deep dive we've done where I've not seen the
not
film.
seen it at all.
And we should talk about
It
Buckaroo Banzai at some point.
Yeah, that's on my list that I've not seen. It's worth noting with the Goonies that it's a prime example of a film that's aimed at kids but doesn't talk down to the kids. Like I've said, the storytelling has so much depth of character and love and heart in it that would go over the heads of a youngster, so the adults can latch onto it. And I mentioned this quite frequently because I mentioned it when I did my review of Clifford, that was a film that spoke down to the child audience, and so it suffered as a result. Things like the Goonies and a lot of films from the 80s did this. They never spoke down. They just presented a family film in such a great way. I was obsessed with this film when it came out. I was obsessed to the degree that I had the sticker album. I collected bubblegum cards, and I also bought the novelization. And through doing so, I was aware at that early age of deleted scenes because the bubblegum cards and the novelization referenced one scene in particular, the rocking octopus scene, that yeah, I remember telling people at school, it's like, there should be an octopus in it. It should be an octopus. And everyone's saying, you're talking rubbish. There's no octopus in the Goonies. But I was right. It was taken out. It's as they find the boat of the galleon that One Eye Willie had in a cove. There was an octopus attacks them. But it was taken out at the last minute simply because it kind of slowed the pace down. It was a great action scene, but it was like, they've got to the treasure. Stop putting more things in their way now. And so it got excised for that. But I've probably still got the bubblegum card somewhere of the rocking octopus. And it was just baffling to encounter for the first time something that was referenced on the marketing materials that never made it into the film. And it's referenced still in one line in the end of the film when one of the characters talks about, and then there was an octopus. And if you'd not known about the novelization or anything, you would not even know what they're talking about. This was another one of those examples of something that would intrigue me so much that it got me to research and look into aspects of filmmaking. And it's probably from a result of this that I started wanting to read magazines that covered films of the time. So I started getting into the reading of the behind the scenes, the discussions with actors, directors, etc. It was a key film for me because whilst it's not my favorite film of the 80s, because let's be honest, Back to the Future, it's always going to be my favorite film of the 80s. It's one of those that was a defining film of the 80s for me, and that's why I think it's important to me.
You can't say fairer than that. I mean, it's like music. It's like any cultural event which touches in a way we can't explain it. It just says something. It speaks to us. It says something in a way that is
Yeah,
so personal. I mean, the film grossed 9 million in its opening weekend in the US, second on the charts behind Rambo: First Blood Part 2. It grossed 63.9 billion. Start again. It grossed 63.9 million in the US and Canada, placing it among the top 10 highest grossing films of 85 and 60.6 million overseas for a worldwide gross of 125 million. There was talk for years of a sequel. Apparently, after the death of Richard Donner, the chances of that happening are absolutely zero. It was always reliant on whether Donner, Spielberg, and the cast would do it. I think it's now to be laid to rest as one of those things that in an alternate universe you did get a Goonies 2. But it's still popular to this day. It's referenced in countless cartoons. It's beloved by true fans. In fact, during lockdown, I don't know if you heard any of them, but Josh Gad did a table read as part of his podcast in December 2020, and had basically part of his virtual reunions with a full reading of the script with Josh Gad as Sloth, Gene Smart, the great Gene Smart, as Mama Fratelli, Kristen Bell as Irene, Carrie Elwes served as the narrator, and the event earned over 130,000 in donations for the charity No Kid Hungry. So there's a real legacy to this film. Are you disappointed there was never a sequel, Andy?
No, I don't feel that this is a film that needed or necessitated any kind of sequel. Yes, the characters were great, and yes, it would have been interesting to pick up at some point and find out what happened with their lives after. Did they all separate? Did they go their own ways? Did they keep in touch as friends later in life? But I don't think there's a story there. I think it would, if we had have had a sequel, it would have just been an unnecessarily forced out sequel, because the story is so self-contained. There's nothing really to pick up on.
So that's this week's deep dive, a film that I've not seen, but shall I watch it? Maybe you could let us know. Maybe drop us a line. Should I watch Goonies? I probably will.
The answer is yes.
We'll have another deep dive for you next week. If you want to see the Goonies, it has landed on Netflix. Prime. Say again?
Amazon Prime.
Amazon Prime. It has landed on Amazon Prime, and you can find it as a Blu-ray. In fact, there's a 30th anniversary edition out there for true fans.